I'm Mallory.
And I'm Laura, and we are here on the campus of Meridian on a nice, crisp fall day.
It's so nice.
So this is super fun to be outside and get some of this cool, refreshing air. But last week we started talking to you about thinking traps, right? So we talked about those times when we might want to take a look at the thought that is driving our emotions and our reactions and maybe change that thought and sort of what does that look like. And we mentioned that there were 6 thinking traps, and last week we talked about 2 of them. We talked about jumping to conclusions and mind reading. And so this week, Mallory, you wanted to tackle the next 2. So
Yes.
why don't you let us know what those are, what we can look for the next 2?
Yeah, so the next 2 thinking traps we're going to talk about are all me and all them. So we'll start with this first one, right? So the all me thinking trap is basically if you've ever been in a situation where something happened, let's say something negative happened, and you automatically feel like me, it was all my fault. What did I do wrong, right? So it's this thinking trap that everything happened because of you, right?
Okay. So is that kind of like, let's say you take an assessment, maybe you're in school or it's an assessment at work or some sort of thing that you're evaluated on and you don't do well, so you automatically like beat yourself up and think like, oh, it's because I didn't prepare enough, or it's because I'm not smart enough, or it's because I didn't do what I was supposed to do.
Right, yeah. And the issue is with this thinking trap is that almost always it's not completely our fault. So, reframing that thought first, recognizing, okay, when am I thinking that everything is my fault, right? When am I thinking this me thought? And then really actively, intentionally taking a step back and thinking, okay, is there anybody else who contributed to this situation? Can it be completely my fault? So in that situation, let's see, if you take an assessment, you did poorly, you think it's all your fault, what other factors could have contributed, right? Were there questions that you absolutely didn't expect and, it wasn't even part of the material? Or
maybe I didn't have the right resources.
Maybe you didn't have the right
Maybe
resources.
the testing environment wasn't, as good as it could have been.
Maybe you had something else in your mind, right? Maybe, or maybe it was really cold in there, right? And then you're subconsciously only thinking about that. So thinking about those things can kind of help get out of that trap or feeling stuck that everything was your fault.
Right. And what I'm hearing you say too is that it doesn't mean that it like absolves us from participation in that problem.
Right.
But again, if we're trying to impact our emotions and our reactions, if I'm like really beating myself up and so I'm like feeling super depressive about that.
Yeah.
If I can recognize that like, okay, maybe I didn't study, but there was also these other factors, then maybe I'm just like disappointed in myself as opposed to like really
hating yourself
distraught,
or
and then I'm gonna get better consequences.
Yeah, exactly. So me. The other thinking trap is kind of the opposite of that. So them. So it's basically when you're in a situation, you automatically think it's all their fault. I did nothing wrong, right?
Yes.
So can you think of an example of this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the example we just used, but in the opposite works.
Yeah.
I also think like both of these work relationally too. So like, if we're in like an argument with, our spouse, or having conflict with a friend, or even at work, or our kids, like, something doesn't go smoothly, and we just be like, it's because of you.
Why do you always do this? Why did you do this? Right?
Yeah.
This one's really difficult, in my opinion, to reframe, because you really have to intentionally think, okay, how did I contribute to this?
Yes.
Maybe, let me think. Maybe I didn't communicate my feelings very well. Or maybe, let's see, in our assessment example, we took an assessment, we did poorly. Those questions were just not anything that I studied for. The environment was really cold and blah, 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 blah. Okay, maybe you could have spent a little more time and studied, right?
Right. Or
that
maybe the email that
contributed
went
to
out
that.
said, hey, bring a sweater, sometimes it's cold.
Yes.
Right? And we were like, no. You know, it's interesting because when you talk about this one being really hard to reframe, this one's hard for me too.
Yeah.
Because I think it's hard for me relationally. It's not hard for me like at work or school or places like that where you can, I think more like subjectively look at things. But when the heart is involved, you know, I think that when we take on any blame for a situation, even if it's super valid and even if it's in our own head, like there's a part of us that feels like we're absolving the other person from their part, and that's hard, right? Like we're like, wait, but I don't mean that you weren't also contributing. So I think that's an interesting part of this, is that it's not taking like a me thinking trap and turning it into an all them,
right,
or vice versa. So yeah,
it's
I
kind
have a hard time with that
of
one
mixing
too.
both, you know.
And I actually had a situation happen in my house. So my daughter, who is normally like really, she's a pretty great kid. Like she's upfront and honest about stuff. So she lied to me about something the other day. And, you know, I got angry and we had a whole conflict about it. And we had a conversation about lying. And she had said, well, Mom, like you didn't make me feel like I could tell you that. And I was like, oh, so I created an environment that, you know, wasn't conducive to her telling the truth.
Yeah.
Which is separate from the fact that lying is wrong and she shouldn't have lied. It doesn't absolve her from it, you know.
I like that she was able to communicate that. It made it a little bit easier for you to kind of soak that in. I feel like that doesn't happen all the time. So being able to do that ourselves is really important, I think. So yeah, great example. So those are the 2 thinking traps this week. Let us know if you've ever felt this way, or if you're able to kind of reframe that in any situation. Next week, we'll have our last 2 thinking traps, which will conclude this little mini series that we've started. And like always, just know that, you know, if you need extra help or need any sort of professional services, Meridian is by your side, and we're open for services. You could always give us a call at 352-374-5600.
Thanks so much. Have a good week.
Bye.